think we're live. Fantastic. Great, we're live. Welcome everyone. Checking audio, checking video. We're looking good, we're live. Welcome. Happy Sunday, everyone. How are we doing? Very happy Sunday. Let's make sure we have a good connection. We're getting everything situated.
Everything's
ready
good.
to go.
Everything's great.
We look
got
good?
All your tools.
Yes, everything is here. Tools are here, you're here, I'm here, we're here. Let's give it another minute. We're like a minute or so early. It's about 2 o'clock right now. We'll let everyone sign on. I know it's a busy Sunday. People's lives are in full swing right now. But to me, there's always time for pasta. And the great thing about doing these live streams like this is, one, you get to join live if you're into that sort of thing. Or two, you get to join as a recording and watch this anytime, whenever you feel like cooking and making pasta. So, for me, thank you for being here. If you're joining us later, thank you for joining us later. It's great to see you, even though I can't really see you. It's almost like you're here with us. As always, everyone in the chat, hello, welcome. Where's everyone from today? I know it doesn't look like we have a lot of people joining us live right now, but that's okay. John, I see you. How's it going? Happy Sunday. John's always with us. Shout out to John for all of his support.
Bill is here.
Bill is here. What's going on, Bill? I know Bill's another regular with us. We
Joseph, Sophie, AJ.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. How are y'all doing? Good? Everyone's good? Are we ready to get started? Everybody have their dough made. They have their chicken grilled and cooled. Everybody follow the recipe video that I provided. I thought that was a little fun, something a little different. For lack of a better word, a little bit of homework. But, for me, I don't think homework's a bad thing. It kind of allows you to spread a recipe across a few days. When I'm ever prepping for a dinner or an event, or even whenever I'm making pasta, even if it's just one thing. If I can make the filling the day before or get some of the cooking done for the filling so it's cooled and chilled, the kitchen's cleaned up, I don't need to kind of do everything in one day, I'm always looking for those sort of little shortcuts and tips and tricks. And so this filling is a great opportunity to take advantage of that. Now, before we begin, some housekeeping things. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're not new here, thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. As always, we have Bella here in the chat room because I can't see you. She's here to help behind the scenes with all the technical things and, of course, to answer everyone's questions. So if you have a question at any time, please feel free to interrupt me. It's interactive. I'm here for you. Go ahead and drop that question into the chat, whether it's about the recipe that we're working on, something that you may have seen me do on Instagram or in life, or you're just wondering how I feel about a certain restaurant or something. I don't know. We're here to hang out, to share my love and passion for cooking and food with all of you. We all share that same passion, right? I know I do. All right, so chat room's there. If you have a question, drop it in. It looks like, if questions don't get too out of control, we kind of answer questions all throughout, stopping as it makes sense. If we see that we don't get to your question immediately, it might be because Bella's holding off because she knows I'm going to cover that in just a couple of minutes. So don't freak out. If we end up going too fast for you, or maybe something ends up happening in your real life that needs all of your attention, go ahead and hit that pause button. You can come back at any time, rewatch this video, you post it on Instagram, tag me at chef.joe.sasto because I want to see what you're doing. It inspires me to see people making my recipes. I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. So that being said, I think that covers all of our housekeeping notes. Am I forgetting anything, Bella?
Nope, that's it.
No, we're good. All right, let's get started and just dive right into it. We're going to start with our filling. So Agnolotti del Plin or Agnolotti dal Plin, depending on who you're asking. I've seen the DEL and the DAL used both ways in Piedmont where Agnolotti originates. I have yet to find an Italian that agrees on, or I guess multiple Italians that agree on the right or proper dialect to use. And I think it really just comes down to a dialect thing, what region you're in, who you learned speaking the language from. Just like, here in the U.S., depending on where you are, you may hear different words for the same thing. Kind of similar in the sense of Agnolotti. So I don't think there's a right answer. I say Agnolotti del Plin, DEL, but that's just because that's the way we did it in the restaurant I was working at and kind of a generational thing passed down to me. That being said, that covers the name, right? Because it was something that always kind of bothered me, but I wanted to know the answer to it. That's the answer. And then we have our filling. Agnolotti classically and traditionally is always a meat filling. And a lot of that has to do with the design and engineering of the pasta shape and the ability for it to hold and seal and create a really nice seal. I'll talk more about that as we're actually making the pasta, but just plant that seed in the back of your memory. A meat, hearty, rich, thick, heavy filling kind of pairs with this shape. Every shape technically should have a certain filling kind of paired with it by design of that shape. The filling to dough ratio, the way that the edges are sealed and pinched, all of those things play into the reason why it goes into and paired with that shape. Yes.
And then Agnolotti Plin is
with a pinch. Exactly. So, I mean, it's one of those things that you could technically use any filling in Agnolotti, but you may see that you've had some trouble if you're trying to use ricotta or you're trying to use a soft filling here, because it's not really the same thing. It doesn't necessarily work as well. So, we have our chicken. It's already been grilled off. It's been marinated. It's cooled. You never want to try to process a hot meat or a hot filling because a lot of those juices will get lost. You do want to let it cool before you do anything with it, whether that be overnight in the fridge, on an ice bath, something like that. One of those things to kind of help along the process. So we have our meat here, and the way this kind of all came together for me was I was actually making kebabs. I was in the mood for kebabs. There's actually a Persian dish that is kebabs similar to this with the yogurt and the garlic and the saffron, and it kind of got me thinking. I was like, this would actually make a very good pasta filling. So I started reading some books, doing a little bit of research, and found that in various regions of Italy, they use saffron, predominantly marinated in meat with yogurt or dairy, and grilled over coals. So even though it's a dish or marinade or something you may normally see in a different cuisine, you also find in Italy. It's kind of interesting how food travels around the world and changes in that sense. Like, so if you're not familiar with saffron, should we talk about it for a second? I mean, saffron is one of those things, it's one of the most expensive ingredients in the world. They're the little threads of a flower, so they have to hand harvest each individual little thread out of a flower, one by one. Lay those all out on trays or blankets and allow those to dry in the sun. And so by weight, it takes, I would say, about 50,000 flowers, 50,000 individual flowers to make 1 pound of saffron. So thinking about it, it's a lot of flowers, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of picking, it's a lot of drying, just to make 1 pound of a spice. You think about, you see other spices, a pound of peppercorns or a pound of chili flakes that are relatively cheap. And so saffron is one of those things that are very expensive. And just like any ingredient, there are really good versions and really expensive versions. They're going to be more pungent, more aromatic, more volatile and flavorful. And then there are more inexpensive versions that maybe weren't dried as well, that maybe weren't grown in the best conditions, that maybe don't have the brightest color, but they're a lot more affordable. And so maybe the affordable one you might have to use a little bit more, or the more expensive one you have to use a little bit less. But in a recipe like this, I think it's a great introduction into saffron because you don't need a lot of it. It's not too overpowering of a flavor. It's definitely a unique flavor that used in the wrong way could take over a dish in maybe not the best way. And so I thought it was a lot of fun here to work in with the yogurt to get things nice and cool, to get that garlic in there so you get a little bit of spice. I mean, chicken and garlic, can't hate on that. Then you got the grilled onions, the grilled peppers. I mean, we're at the tail end of summer, so peppers are just popping off all over the farmer's market. If you've been, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we have all of that. Grilled, you don't have to do it on skewers. Like I said, I was doing it on skewers because I wanted to be a little extra. But this past time, I just did it individual, chopped everything up into pieces, gave it a quick grill, cooked it about 90% on the grill because that last 10% of cooking is going to happen inside of the pasta when it's in the water. So ideally, these are not totally cooked, overcooked, done and dry. They're going to get their last bit of cooking as a filling. And that's kind of a rule that I use when it comes to any meat filling inside of pastas. I try not to cook it all the way. And so that way it can continue cooking in the water. Something a la like tortellini filling with that pork, the roasted chicken here. An exception to that would maybe be braised beef, where you're going to braise it for hours. It's cooked all the way, and you're just reheating it in the water. So, that being said, we covered our chicken, we covered our marinade. Now we're about to jump in and make our filling. Normally, in regular circumstances, whether it be in a restaurant or if this wasn't a live stream, I would be doing this in a meat grinder. I just like a meat grinder for making fillings. That kind of medium grind works really well, where it kind of gives you just enough texture on the meat and you don't worry about over processing it. That being said, I know not everyone has the meat grinder attachment. Not everyone has a meat grinder. I've run into some people that have bought that whole kitchen top meat grinder just to grind some things. It's awesome if you have the space for it, if you're able to do that. An alternative would be that KitchenAid attachment for your KitchenAid. If you have a KitchenAid, those work really well. I think I even put the link to that down somewhere in the description. But all that being said, a food processor will work just as well if you're a little careful, just not to over process it to like a paste, and we're just breaking it down to a filling. You with me? So I'm going to throw on some gloves here. What's nice about letting this rest overnight too is any of those juices that kind of leach out of the chicken, leach out of the peppers and onions, you're able to capture all of those, and those go into the filling, keeping things really moist, really juicy, really delicious. And I like using thighs as a filling. You could use breasts. I just find thighs, again, juicier, more flavorful, more fat. Fat is flavor. And that connective tissue and muscle that you find in thighs work really well as a pasta filling when you kind of break it down. Versus the breast can sometimes get a little bit of dry, but if you're into that sort of thing, or breast, that's totally fine. Questions?
90% done. Do you mean the inside of the chicken would have been just slightly raw from AJ?
Yes, so AJ was asking 90% done. Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily raw, but maybe medium rare. You know, it's that like stage of chicken where if you cut into it by the bone, it like maybe is a tiny bit pink and you're like, I don't know if I should be eating this, and like, you know, freaks some people out. That's kind of what you're aiming for here on your chicken. If you cooked it all the way done, all the way through, and not to worry, not the end of the world. But we're just talking about like in an ideal circumstance, because that last little bit of cooking is going to happen in our water pot inside of the pasta. Make sense? And so that's why I like just kind of like grilling it a little bit on both sides, searing it, kind of letting it carry over. My chicken parm filling, I do the same thing. Get a nice caramelization, build all that flavor on the exterior, and then you have the rest of the cooking happening, that 10% in the water as the filling. So we'll get everybody here, all of those grilled onions, the grilled peppers. The peppers I'm not bothered peeling. I'm not going to take the seeds out of them. You could if you wanted to. I just don't think it's necessary in something like this. It just kind of, I guess, depends on how refined you're trying to be. All of those wonderful chicken jus, extra bit of marinade that came off of there. That's all going to add a big punch of flavor. Good stuff we're talking about. And I'm just using a glove to keep my hand nice and clean. Now we're done with that. We'll throw the lid on here. And we're just going to pulse it. We're not looking for, like I said, a fine paste, but we're looking for like a pipeable puree. Something akin to almost like a meatball stuffing. If you made meatballs, you know, ground beef or ground pork with all the goodies in there, that's kind of what we're going for with our filling. So let's get this going. We'll do a little pulse action. Then I'll show you close up what we're looking for here. But I like pulsing instead of just pureeing, because things could kind of get out of hand. And sometimes too, if you just let it blast on high, everything kind of like lifts up to the sides of the blender, and then you don't let it fall back into the blades. Like I can see right now, there's still some big chunks of onion on the side of the bowl here. Like if we come and take a little close look. It's almost like a mushroom duxelle, if you know what that is, like finely chopped, pureed, pasted mushrooms. But you can see there's like some big chunks of onions that kind of rode up the side of the bowl. So I'm just going to make sure to kind of give this a quick little scrape. And a couple more pulses to bring it back together. And then something else I realized that's just very unusual about this is there's no cheese in the filling. And you know, if you know me, I like putting cheese in a lot of things. Whoop. I let that run. I like putting cheese in a lot of things. You could totally, if you have some like Parm or Pecorino, or maybe you're like hanging out at your favorite local cheese shop and picked up something really cool, you could throw a chunk of that in here, kind of give you that little bit of extra cheesiness. In this dish, I kind of like the fact that the dairy was coming from the yogurt. You get that little bit of butter, and there's not every pasta needs cheese. Some people like automatically think you need to sprinkle cheese on top of pasta because that's what you're doing. If you kind of think about it, that cheese is an extra ingredient. There's a reason you're adding it, whether you want the nuttiness, you want the saltiness. This has a lot of those factors here. We got the hazelnuts, we got the saltiness from the chicken. It's seasoned all the way through. We got that nice kind of like bright, interesting burst of flavor from the saffron. So all of those kind of things that you would normally maybe find in cheese are already here. So it doesn't necessarily need it, but you know, if you're craving a little bit of cheese or you're like a Parm fanatic, I'm not going to tell you no. All right, so let's take a look at what we're working with here. I'm going to give this a small little taste just to check for salt. I feel like it needs a tiny bit of salt. I did season the chicken, there was seasoning the marinade. There wasn't seasoning on the peppers, so it's possible and that could be, you know, what it needs. If you decide to add Parm or something like that here, you might not need the salt. It's always good to kind of check your work as you're going through things here. Make those adjustments. Everything's not perfect the first time you do something. Alright, let's take a look real quick what we have here as our filling. So, we got a nice paste, chunky but smooth. You can see still a little bit of texture in there. What you're really looking for in any agnolotti filling is something like this. It's going to be pipeable. It's going to be just wet enough that there's moisture in there, there's juices, there's like the chicken fat and beef fat, whatever it is that you're using. And that's going to like help keep things really plump and delicious. It's not too dry. And it's also not so wet where it's like sopping out or leaching liquid. Those are like two things you don't want. You know, anytime you're working on a pasta filling, you want to think about the moisture content of that filling. You want it to be wet so it's juicy and not dry, but you also don't want it too wet to where it kind of leaches out into your dough and makes it really hard to fill or stuffed. So some of those kind of mistakes that I've seen people make along the way are just either having too wet or too dry of a filling. You're looking for something like this. This is regardless of the blend of meat that you're using, this is kind of what you're going for, all right? So we're done with our power off. And now for me, I'm going to go into a piping bag. I get these really big ones off of the internet. They're pretty easy to find if you're looking into piping bags, you make pasta or filling or whatever. I always recommend finding the big ones versus like the smaller size, because the big ones you can fit more filling in there. They're easier to handle. You can kind of like tie up the tops and you don't end up having to like have a bunch of little bags. You can have one big bag and get everything you need in there. The best way to fill this, if you've never done that before, allow me to demonstrate. So what you're going to do, take your piping bag, fold the top down all the way around the exterior, pushing the inside up through the middle. And that's going to allow you to kind of like wrap the bag around your hand. You're going to get a real nice kind of cup or grip holder, so that way anything you accidentally spill or get on the outside of the bag is just going to end up on the inside. So that way you're not cleaning up the bag. The bag's nice and clean for your hands. You're able to kind of use it and work with it right away. Then we're going to come in with our filling, and we can just scoop it right into the bag. And that's nice about having these big bags is you don't need like a stand. You don't need someone to put this in. You're able to just kind of grab it, move right along, and scoop all of your filling right into the mix. Oh, this smells so good too, by the way. I love grilled things. I love when you can get outside and grill. For me, I always like think of the grill as like two bonuses. One is like using an extra ingredient because you get the flavor of like either smoke or fire. You get that char that you can't really get on the stove. And then two, if you're only using the grill, it's one less thing to clean up really. Because the grill, you kind of just scrub it down. You don't have to worry about the splatter of the stove or anything like that. And it's just nice to get outside. You know, cooking outdoors is always refreshing. Feeling the sun on your face. It's nice to get out of the kitchen every once in a while. So I really like this. If you don't have access to a grill, I know I mentioned it, but you could easily throw all of the meat, everything on a sheet tray right under the broiler on high in your oven. Get it nice and charred, golden roasted, toasted, kind of like, if you're making salsa or something like that. And you'll get that same result, a nice, really rich, robust, aromatic filling with tons of flavor, all kind of packed in there. All right, so we got this done. Filling in our bag. Questions. How does everyone feel about the filling? Have we tasted the filling? Are you happy with the smell of the filling, the way it looks? Is anyone worried about their filling? I'm very excited about the filling. I've been looking forward to this since I recipe tested it. I don't even know, like 2 months ago. Wanting to eat this again. Like, agnolotti, one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. Bella laughs, but she knows it's true.
No, it's just so good.
It's just so good. Like a proper, like meat-filled agnolotti. Yes. All right. So now, see how I can just flip the bag back inside out. I'm able to now tie this off, give it a nice little twist. Because I'm using the large bag, I have all this extra room at the top.
AJ wants to know, what wine or beer would you pair with the chicken filling?
Ooh, what wine or beer? I think, I don't know if it's a color association, but I'm just thinking flavor profile wise. I think like an orange wine, something like natural orange with the skin contact would work really well because you kind of got like that really like intense garlic flavor, the onions, the peppers, that charred bit from the chicken, and something really crisp and refreshing and kind of like that has that bite like an orange wine does. I think would pair really well. Almost like it'll complement rather than contrast a lot of the things going on here. So that would be where I go. Beer? That's a really good question. I don't often do beer pairings. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I wouldn't go with something heavy. Kind of the same thing. I want something light, something crisp. You kind of like go with like one of those beers that kind of like floral notes and fruity notes. Like I wouldn't do that like triple double, quadruple IPA that's just like tastes like hops. Because I think like the robust, really intense flavor of hops could contrast everything you have going on in the rest of the dish. And a lot of times, like, a contrasting pairing works really well on some occasions. But I also have a good appreciation for the complementary pairings. And that's what's nice about if you're doing a whole pairing menu with multiple courses or something like that. Having some things compare, some things contrast, really kind of shows the skill and the knowledge of a good sommelier or someone that is curating that pairing program for you. I recently had a really good non-alcoholic pairing at a restaurant, Demi, in Minneapolis, Gavin Kaysen's tasting menu. It's like a 20-seat counter, and they do a non-alcoholic pairing as well as the wine pairing. But the non-alcoholic was really cool. They had some sparkling white teas, like a jasmine tea to start the meal, those cold chilled sparkling white tea. And then they had a couple of house-made sodas, like a sorghum and pine soda. They made a wine. They made their own wine to go with the meat course. That was a mock wine. It was hibiscus and red fruits and a little bit of warm spices, all kind of infused for a couple of days and bottled. It looked exactly like red wine, kind of had the flavors and tastes of it, but non-alcoholic. If you're ever out dining and you see that any beverage pairing is an option, I would recommend it depending on where you are. I always find that really interesting to kind of see how restaurants approach that because there's a lot of skill that goes into doing a non-alcoholic beverage pairing. And just saying. Good segue. Anyway, so we are now ready for our pasta dough, right? But before we get over to our pasta making table, let's take a moment, go over to our stove. We want to fill up a pot with some water. Make sure we have a pot coming up to a boil slowly. because we're going to need something to cook our pasta in, right? So I just have a small pot here, filled most of the way with water. There's no salt in here yet. We will season that later, right before we cook. But I like to get a lid on here so that way it's not evaporating, making the room steamy, and then you're not losing water. It's ready when we're ready. So take a moment, get some water on the stove if you have not already, because we're going to need that for cooking the pasta, right? Now, coming over here to our pasta machine. I'm using it takes a little bit of extra work. If you're out there and you're rolling it by hand, don't worry, you're not alone. But today I'm using my electric sheeter. If you have a hand crank model or the KitchenAid attachment, all of those work really well and really great. We can kind of go over some basic tips and how-tos. If you haven't seen me roll pasta before, talk about it. There's a lot of things to cover, but that's okay. That's what I'm here for. Any other questions before we dive into this? Let's grab our dough. Our dough now at this point should be tempered. It's room temperature. It's rested. I made this maybe like three or 4 hours ago. It's been hanging out, chilling, covered so that way it doesn't dry out, but also not in the fridge. A cold dough is going to be very hard to work with, and so always you want your dough room temperature before you use it. So even if you decided to make your dough the day in advance, yesterday or the day before, you always want to bring it out to room temperature a couple of hours before you plan on using it. So it's going to be much easier to manipulate and to work with. So now we have our dough ball, right? I'm going to grab a little bit of bench flour. For my bench flour, I'm using 00. You can use all-purpose, but I like the 00 just because it's the flour that's already in the dough, and so that works really well. So now we have our dough ball. One of the things to take note of, I did take the time, like I had shown in the videos, when it came out of the machine or when I was finished kneading it by hand, to really kind of like help get it to a beautiful round shape, so that way it's nice and smooth at the top, it's not cracked, or kind of have any of those like dough fissures, because that's going to help us when we roll it not have to laminate our dough. If you have a very nice, proper piece of dough before you even go into your machine, it'll save you some time and some effort when you actually start sheeting. So that's like tip and trick number 1. Second, what you're going to want to do is before you even go near your machine, oh, wait, I think we're back.
I think we're back. Are we back?
Give it a
Yes.
second. I think we're back.
We are back.
We're back. Technology. Sorry about that. We had a power surge, and so the power went out, the computer went out, the Wi-Fi went out. But now we're back. Thank you for standing by. Let's jump back into it then. We'll address the links if you need to rewatch this and you're joining us. I don't know if it's going to be one continuous link if you're watching this at a later time, but we're going to figure it out.
There's
I'll
a lot
email
of people
everyone
watching
after
in a
this.
later time.
Yeah,
so.
we'll figure it out after. But we're all here. Everyone has their dough out now ready. Our water's going. Where did we leave off? So we have our dough getting ready to roll. So tip number 1, having your dough pre-formed, pre-shaped before you get it to rest. Now what the next important step is to manipulate this dough out. Give it a little bit of work. First, I like using my palm and my hand to kind of help stretch this and work this into what resembles a rectangle, because a rectangle is just going to elongate when it goes into the machine. So starting in geometric patterns that make sense, that you're going to be able to replicate, are going to help keep the dough the right shape and size as you work it out. If you start with an oval or you start with a circle and you put that into your machine, the machine is going to elongate that circle. It's going to elongate that oval. And you're going to end up with one of those really kind of thin, narrow gator tail pieces of pasta. If you ever tried to roll pasta before, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So what we have here is our rectangle. I'm going to come in with a little bit of bench flour up over the top and over the bottom, and really you just need a little bit. Don't go crazy with the flour. I've seen some people, as soon as they start making pasta, they grab a handful of flour and throw it up in the air, get it all over the entire kitchen. There's no need for that. A little bit of flour goes a long way here when you're working with your pasta dough. Now you're going to want to grab your rolling pin, right? We're going to go right into the center of the dough. We're going to press down, and I like working away from me, working from the middle out. So that's going to help extend and work the dough into a larger rectangle before it even goes into the machine. So we're going to start here in the middle, pressing and working the dough away from us. And then we can pick this piece up now that is thin on one side and thick on the other, spin it around 180 degrees, put your pin right back in the center, and then press and roll the dough out. So what this is accomplishing is two things. It's giving us a head start for when we jump into our pasta machine, so the dough doesn't get stressed and the machine doesn't get stressed having to do too much work, because you can't just take a big thick piece of dough and force it into the machine. It just doesn't work like that. So instead we want to work with our rolling pin in our hands to be able to get this piece of dough into a much more manageable and manipulable piece that could go into our machine nice and easily. So we've done that partially with our rolling pin. Taking a look now here, we're back into some sort of oval-like shape. We've lost our rectangle. So if we were to put this in the machine, these two oval-like ends are going to extend out and they're going to get longer and narrower as we roll our dough out. We don't want that. So instead, I'm going to come in and just use my hands and kind of stretch the dough out on each side. Don't be afraid to manipulate pasta dough. Pasta dough is made to be manipulated. We got all that gluten in there. We got those egg yolks and the egg whites. All that extra protein from the wheat and the water are interacting. We've done all the kneading. We've created these really long, big chains that allow us to stretch and work our dough. So now I have my edges re-pulled out and we are looking much more like a rectangle again. So I do this every single time. It is second nature, it's habit. Anytime I'm working with pasta dough, whether it be a really big batch or a small batch, I always start with this step and this process here. Kind of getting my dough from the middle out to the ends. And then you're able to have a really beautiful and nice long sheet of pasta that's not ripping on the sides, that's not elongating and going into those gator tails when you try to roll this out. And then the other thing you notice, we're not going to have to fold or laminate the dough because we took the time at the beginning during the kneading process to make sure that we had a nice smooth surface, that any of those rough edges or fissures were all kind of tucked underneath, and now they're lost and hidden into the pasta itself. So now we come over to our machine, the moment we've all been waiting for. Whether you're using the hand crank or whether you're using an electric machine, they all kind of work the same way. You have the knob over here that's going to tell you the thinness or thickness setting you're working with. You always want to start on the widest setting and you work your way down to the thinnest setting. You don't ever want to skip numbers. And then often, depending on your machine, you may have to run it through that number twice. I know in the KitchenAid it definitely helps to go through each number twice before going down to the smaller number. Same thing sort of with the hand crank. It's just because it's, it's not electric. The gears in here do a really nice job. The other rollers are just maybe not as strong, and so you need that double run through to get a better result. Next thing to consider, these numbers here on your machine are totally arbitrary. They're just there so you know, as a pasta maker, that you're using the same numbers every time you do this, and you're walking the dough down at a nice even increment, and you're not kind of just guesstimating how far to turn this every single time. Every machine, and depending on how old your machine is, the numbers are going to be different. I know some years, depending on what year you got your KitchenAid attachment, it starts at number 8 and goes down to number 1. Sometimes it starts at number 1 and goes up to number 7. Mine here in front of me starts at number 10 and goes down to number 0. So they're all kind of arbitrarily placed onto the machine, and there's no universal number or guidebook as to what numbers work best. I do know, though, that if your KitchenAid, whatever it goes to, a good stopping point is about 2 or 3 from the thinnest. The thinnest is usually too thin and great for things like pastry and crackers, but not so great for filled pastas. It just gets way too thin and hard to work with. So, for example, I'll say that again, just in case you got lost there. Say your machine goes down to a number 8. 8 is your thinnest setting, 1 is your thickest. You're probably going to want to take this to about number 5, maybe number 6. You don't now necessarily need to do that all at once, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So we're going to go here into our machine. Widest setting first. We're using the back of our hands to hold the dough in place so we're not poking holes with our fingertips. And we're going to roll the dough into the machine, allowing it to just flow out through the bottom. We're going to go down to our next thinnest setting. As we're guiding into the machine, I like to hold the dough in the back to make sure it doesn't get bunched up. It doesn't kind of go in either direction too far. And this backhand is arguably more important than the front hand. So pretend you only had one hand to do this, or maybe you're cranking. You don't have a sous chef. I'm going to pretend I'm here cranking. This backhand is guiding the dough, is making sure it stays in the machine real nice while I crank and turn. And then you can come down here to the front and take a look at your dough. So now we've gone through 2 or 3 times. A couple things to look at now here on our dough. If we take a nice close look, you can see it's almost kind of got this like leathery like pattern. There's a couple of air bubbles. These are all really good signs. Air bubbles in the dough means you got texture. You did a really good job kneading. You don't want to try to pop those out or get rid of them. If you were to fold and laminate your dough and roll it back through, you're going to lose those air pockets and you're going to lose this texture on the surface. So you don't really want to do either of those. If you see all of these things, you see these kind of like striations on here, that bit of texture, that's all really good signs. It's going to help grip your sauce. That's going to be all things you're looking for. Now you can see we've already kind of lost our rectangle a little bit, but that's okay. We can come in here with our hands again if you want and kind of give this a nice little stretchy stretch to help form this back into a nice big rectangle. So if you notice your dough now starts to get too unmanageable, I'd say that normally happens about halfway down through the machine. So I got maybe 2 more notches to go here. We're gonna go, I'm gonna pretend I'm cranking. For whoever's got the hand crank out there, I'm here with you, okay? We're cranking it through. We're almost halfway. I'm at about number 5 right now. So whatever your halfway point is, your dough is gonna start to get very long. And maybe you're running out of space on your counter. And that's okay, I'm gonna show you what to do. So what I'm gonna do is take a little bit of flour, my same bench flour, and I'm going to dust it over the surface of the dough. Get a nice, even and thin layer of flour here. And now I'm gonna come in with my roller or my cutter, and I'm gonna break this up into segments. So each segment maybe about 5 or 6 inches, kind of whatever makes sense for you. You can even go as far as whatever the width is of your machine, maybe that's the length you cut your segment into. Because then you'll be able to take that and put it right into the machine and you'll have like really nice, even, equal pieces. So I'm gonna kind of give myself, let's do this, I'll go here. I'm gonna give myself one nice little segment. You can cut up the rest or leave it into one nice big piece. I'm going to give this a couple of folds. And then I'm going to grab my same reusable zip bag that I rested my dough in. Carefully and gently place my dough back into this bag. And this is just going to sit on the countertop. It's going to stop the dough from drying out. It's going to be in this kind of semi-ready state. It's already been pre-shaped. It's already been pre-rolled. And now I kind of have that dough ready to go. That dough is ready to go. So now when I come in with this one, all I have to do is roll it out. A couple more notches on my machine, and I'm ready to go. So now we're dropping our number down again. We're going to go in through with our machine another number. And now we have a much smaller strip of dough to work with instead of that really long, big, unmanageable piece that might be taking up too much space on your counter, too much space in the kitchen as you're trying to figure everything out. So now we're coming in here again. You can see even more so now as we kind of get finer and thinner. Those lines and striations, all really good signs of texture. If you see that on your dough, you're in a really good place. You know what you're doing. That's kind of like what you're looking for. All those bubbles, all that. I got one more pass through, and then I am one from the end. So on my machine, I'm stopping at a number 1. If you're on the KitchenAid, you probably want to stop at a number 5, maybe a number 6. I'd even recommend stopping at 5 and then trying it on number 6 and eating a couple pieces side by side, so then you know which one you prefer. But that's just me. I like doing comparisons like that. I like to compare a lot of things. I feel like I'm always doing a little bit of testing here and there. So now we have this really big piece, and then what's nice, if your countertop again is too long, you'd always cut this in half, and then you end up with 2 halves, 2 nice thin strips of dough. And I'll give you an exact measurement here just so we're all, on the same page. A good number to have here is about 3.5 inches or so. I've even gone as far as to mark my cutter, because I've done this so many times and I don't like eyeballing it and I don't like wasting dough, that I have a mark here on my cutter and I know I'll cut my dough to this size. Is perfect for agnolotti, because this is my agnolotti cutter. So like little tips and tricks like that. Don't be afraid to kind of make yourself breadcrumbs along the way, so you know where you are in the process and how you particularly like things. So we have our 2 pieces of dough. Now we're going to come in with our filling. You got to open this bag up. Don't cut your hole too big. You want it just big enough where your filling is going to be able to pipe out. Too big and your filling is going to come out too quickly. You're just going to have a harder time controlling what's happening. Yeah, okay, we're good. Now we have 2 options here with our filling. I've seen agnolotti done both ways, and I don't necessarily think there is a right way to do it. There's a what are you more comfortable with way of doing it. And so I'll show you both, and then I recommend you try both and see kind of what works out best for you. So the first is to just come down your dough, give yourself about 1 or 2 finger width on the end from where you're going to start piping, and you're going to want to pipe just about right in the middle. And you could go 1 nice long strip, again stopping about a finger length or so from the end. Now we're going to take our water spray bottle. I really like the water spray bottle. It's my favorite tool in the kitchen. It allows you to seal the dough without any egg, without having to use a paintbrush. It applies just the right amount of water, spraying it up into the air, allowing the water to ever so gently fall down onto the surface of the dough. And so then you have a really nice moist surface of the dough. You're going to take this back part closest to you, and you're going to fold it over your filling, being careful as to keep this back end as close to the filling as possible. So you're not creating an air pocket behind the filling. You're putting the dough right up against the filling. And so you have 1 nice strip of filling and dough all the way through. So now at this point, I like coming in with just my thumb and pressing, not to seal, but just pressing to shape the dough right up against the filling. Again, trying to remove any air, so that way it is just dough touching filling. Air is sort of your enemy here when you go to seal. If you have air pockets between the dough and your filling, you run the tendency of the agnolotti blowing open, of the agnolotti leaking out, of then not getting that really nice proper seal. So that's what we're focusing on here, all these little tips and tricks on how to make a really nice solid seal on your pasta. So now we have that tube of filling running across the dough. Now I like to come in, this is where agnolotti gets its name. Agnolotti del Plin means agnolotti with a pinch, or pasta with a pinch. So I'm going to come in using my thumb and my index fingers, little pinchers right here, and we're going to pinch. I kind of do this, it looks like I'm doing it at the same exact time, but I always do my left side slightly first and then the right. So that way I'm pushing air or filling in one direction and it kind of has somewhere to go. So as I'm pressing, I'm pinching and sealing and pressing down. And so now we're going to go down the row, and you can make these as small or as large as you'd like. But what's important is that you're pressing hard to connect those 2 layers of pasta. You're squeezing filling down the row, so then that way it's going somewhere and you're removing any air. And then at the same time, I didn't worry about pressing that front part too hard because I like the dough having a little bit of that room to move in the front. If you press and seal this front portion before you squeeze, you sometimes run the tendency of the dough having nowhere to move or the filling have nowhere to go, and you kind of get these like really weird oblong shapes. So now we're coming in. It's time to cut, right? We have our Agnolotti cutter, these beautiful fluted wheels here. Can we get a close-up view? Let's see how much closer we can get. Is that good? Better? Yes? Great. We'll do more, so we'll see it again up close and personal. But this is a little closer, I think a little better. So now we have our cutter, our wheel. What we're gonna do, keep in mind, this cutter works best and very well on wood. It needs that surface contact and that friction with the wood to be able to kind of create a nice seal and to roll and move. If you try to roll this on like a tile or metal countertop, it doesn't roll that well. It doesn't able to grip the surface, and so you're not going to get a very nice seal, you're not going to get a very nice roll. And so if you're working on a tile or marble or stainless steel surface when you're making agnolotti, I'd recommend you grab a cutting board and you do these little segments on top of the cutting board. Then you'll notice your sealing and your cutting is going to work much better, and you're going to get a nice, more refined final product. So now that we have our piece here, I'm going to come in, starting on one end. I'm going to clip that last piece, creating a bit of a seal there. Then I'm going to come down the front, all the way across. And what's nice to do here is to create some counter tension. So with my left hand, I'm creating tension over here as I roll towards that hand. If I don't create tension with this hand and I just roll, this tendency has a tendency to move, to potentially bunch up, to kind of like the dough get cut up or stuck on itself. But if you're able to pull as you roll, you get a much nicer seal all the way across the piece of pasta, and you can pull your strip off, and you have our beautiful little agnolotti almost there. So now the last thing you're going to want to do here is to come up through each middle part and give your last little cut that helps define the shape. Now what helps to help get you that nice little cup and rounded kind of classic agnolotti look is to come in here. As you're rolling, I'm using my lead hand to kind of help flip these guys up as I cut and roll. So that way we're pre-shaping and forcing them up into a cut and cupped movement. So that way you have that nice little cup, that nice little kind of pocket there to grip and hold all of the sauce. And then you have a nice seal on both sides because one, you squeezed really hard, you pushed all of the filling, and we cut on a wooden surface. A lot of things can go wrong here if you're not using wood, if you're going on stainless steel, if you're not squeezing tight enough with your filling. And then also, to kind of talk about what I had mentioned before, the certain filling having to do with a certain shape. So with an agnolotti, it's really helpful to have a robust, thick, heavy filling, a meat filling for this, because occasionally you're not going to get a perfect seal. This one right here has a little bit of filling kind of showing out the side, but if you're using a big, thick, heavy filling, when you cook these, that's not going to burst out. It's not going to go anywhere. Versus if you're using like a liquid butternut squash filling or a really loose ricotta filling, that's going to immediately pour out and spool into your sauce and kind of just become a big mess. Versus this is not really going to go anywhere. It's going to stay nice and compact. It's going to kind of cook and set because it's that chicken, it has the protein in there. It's going to hold itself in place, and you're not going to kind of have it falling all over the place with your pasta pieces exploding. So by design, those Italians are actually pretty smart. Each shape is kind of designed to pair with a certain filling. Just like tortellini, that tiny little, really super porky, salty, robust filling is made to go in a tiny little pocket of pasta. So you get this kind of like perfect contrast of lots of dough, little bit of filling, really intense flavor. If you try to pack that tortellini filling inside of a big ravioli, it's not going to work. It's going to be really weird to eat that much filling in one bite. So when you're deciding what filling to put with certain shapes on your pasta making journey, start thinking about how much filling to dough to size of that shape ratio, because those are things in the pasta world the chefs are thinking about. At the end of the day, we all want to get a little better. So now we have our piece of dough here. Let's come back in. We'll do another round. We're up close again, and I'll show a different version, and then we'll kind of run everything back one more time just so we have a nice little plate of pasta. So now this one, we're going to pipe without one straight line. How do I say that? We're just going to pipe each individual agnolotti, leaving that gap. And some people prefer this depending on the filling. I've seen, they say, you're making sure that you get a really nice seal, nothing's going to come out. And I get it, it makes sense. But for me, this just takes longer. And you can still do a really nice job by typing the line, as long as you kind of are taking those extra steps to make sure everything is nice and tight and needy. So we're going to come in, same thing, we're going to go take this back in. We're going to fold this up, keeping the dough as close to that filling on that back line as possible. I'll show you a little side shot here. So the dough is right up against that back line of the filling. You can see each individual little piece. Now we're going to, same thing, come in. I'm going to use my thumb, and I'm not pressing to seal. I'm just pressing to kind of help shape and guide the dough together with the filling in the front. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come down the row, giving our pinches. And now, because we do have this little air pocket between each piece, I find it is important to kind of be mindful when you're pinching to make sure you're allowing the air to go somewhere. Otherwise, it's just going to blow out the front, and you're just going to kind of have these holes throughout the pasta. So I always go left then right, almost simultaneously as I pinch down and press. And so you'll see here, we're pressing and pinching, we're pressing and pinching, and you can kind of see the dough puff up as it moves down the row, because that's the filling, or that's the air, kind of going down the row, all the way till you get to the end. And then the air just comes out that extra side. You have the dough right up against the filling on all of these pieces. There's no air pockets. You have a really nice seal all the way across. My one, I guess, critique or problem with doing it this way is you sometimes end up with, until you get really efficient at your piping, some extra big wings to the pasta, which is not a bad thing. Just, it depends on stylistic. So again, we're going to come in with our cutter here. We're going to snip off that end. We're going to come down the front, creating a bit of tension all the way across. Remove that front strip. And now, same thing as before. We're going to kind of give ourselves a little bit of a help by rolling over as we're cutting. So that way we're helping create that pocket shape, that real classic agnolotti shape. And then you can kind of see they're slightly different than their little chubby counterparts. These have a little bigger wing. These are the ones we piped individually. These are the ones we piped the line of. So they're similar but different. And they're going to cook up the same. It's just more of an aesthetic thing. This one maybe has a little more dough, which isn't the end of the world, but there's a difference. And so we have about a plate of pasta here. I think we might be good. Unless, does anyone want to see that one more time?
Let's see it one more time.
Let's see it one more time. We'll run it back one more time. Because I'm going to eat this. I'm very excited about it. I might as well have more pasta to eat. Nothing wrong with that. So here's a good example. We're going to come back in here. I have my dough all ready to go. It's already partially rolled out. Same thing. I know the length that I'm going to need this piece to be to become agnolotti is about the length of my roller. We're going to place this back into our bag, set this on the side, and now we're going to come back to our machine and we're going to do a little bit of rolling. Right? So we took a mental note. I know I stopped this on number 4, so now I'm going to come back in here at number 3 and continue this just a couple more passes through to get us to the point that we want. To become pasta. So 1, 3, then we'll go 2. And then we'll go 1. And then, yeah, we'll have a nice big bowl of pasta to eat. Big plate. I'm plating on a plate today. Same thing. I'm going to cut this in half. So that way I have 2 pieces. And I think agnolotti might be one of my favorite shapes to make. It's just, to me, it's the fastest one of pasta shapes to make. I'm just, maybe I made the most of it. I don't know. I made a lot of tortellini too. I just really enjoy this one. The process, the strips. Like when you get going really fast, you would have like 6 or 8 of these long strips across your entire board. And then you just kind of pipe lines all the way. You fold all the way, you pinch all the way, and then you cut up all the way. And if there are 2 pasta makers going through the whole process, one guy's rolling, the other person's cutting, the other one's sealing, someone else is going this. Just becomes a very like orchestrated dance of pasta making. One of those beautiful things I think you could witness. So we'll go back in. We'll do this again both ways just so everyone can see. We'll do a piped line, we'll do individuals, then we'll cook and bring everything together.
Yay!
Hopefully we don't get another power surge as we bring our water back to a boil. Fingers crossed, right? Okay, let's go. We're gonna go one nice thin little line. I want little agnolottis this time. Let's see how little we can make them. So I'm gonna do a really thin line all the way across. If you wanted to make them bigger, you could do a really thick line. You could also like create your little seals, or your pinches rather, your plins. You can make them wide and have like really long pieces of pasta, or you can make them really thin and have little tiny pieces of pasta. We used to do little itsy bitsy versions of these, kind of like this. I'll show you. Tiny little agnolotti. Which, you know, I was, at the time, I would call them agnolini, and I was wrong by saying that because there's another shape called agnolini. And I just thought, I was like, oh, mini agnolotti must be agnolini. Agnolini's different. Agnolini's like a round little button. Agnolotti, even if it's a little version like this. So these are little tiny ones that we did all the way across. Pinching, sealing, just making sure I have enough space between each one to get my cutter in there. That's the one thing to be mindful of. The width of your blade is about your only limitation on how small you can make these. We used to do like little tiny ones like this filled with like fonduta, which is like a liquid fontina filling, but we'd set it with gelatin, and then it was like go with like sunchokes and white truffles and black trumpet mushrooms. We serve it in little like truffle boxes. It was a quince. It was a really good dish. So same thing coming in here now. We're going all the way across, giving ourselves a nice little pull, a guideline. We have our trim dough, and then we can come up here, same exact movement. We're going to give these a little right in between each piece. And you have then now these itsy bitsy,
So cute.
little cute. Let me find a good. Here we go. We have our little babies, and we have our bigger boys, all hanging out. And we're gonna cook them all together. They can all hang out together in the same spot. As long as they're sitting on wood, I don't have to put any extra flour down. I don't have to worry about them sticking. If I was on like a countertop or a surface here, I'd want to get a little flour underneath them because without the wood surface, these might sweat a little bit. They might start to stick to the counter, but as long as you're on wood, you don't have to worry about anything sticking. They're going to be fine. They might stick to each other if you're not careful, but they're not going to stick to your surface. Now again, bring this in. We have our nice strip here. We're going to do little individual piped pieces. All the way down the line. Good stuff. We're going to come in with our trusty spray bottle. Give that one nice little mist. And then we'll fold this over the backside, being sure to keep this back end. Hold on, let me make sure you can see that. Keep this back end right up against all of those little filling pockets. And then same thing, very gently just press the front. And I'm not pressing, I'm just running my thumb along the front part of the pasta here in order to create a semi-seal, almost like a guideline. And because there's a little bit of moisture there from our spray bottle, it is like, sealed. I can't just open it up, but it's not pressed together to the point where it's like two become one. It's like a semi-seal. Then we'll come in here, again, let me get a little closer so everyone can see what's happening. We're going to come down the row. We're going to pinch between each one, and as I'm pinching, I'm making sure to work the air down my tube of dough and filling. So that way I'm not trapping any air in the pasta. Because again, remember, air is not our friend. It's going to cause some blowouts. It's going to cause issues. So we want to make sure all that air is going down the row, all the way out at the very end. Then I always like to kind of pick up the strip if you can to make sure it's not like stuck to your countertop, because there's nothing worse than getting through the whole thing trying to cut and then realizing you pressed too hard down and you stuck everybody to the surface. So another little tip or trick to take a look at. We're going to come up here and cut our end. Then we're going to, same thing. Everybody, I think, understands the process. We're going to come all the way down. Then we'll peel this piece all the way up. And last but not least, we're going to do our little roll, letting everybody get so nice, so good. All of our little agnolotti. We have singular, agnolotto, right? Because O is singular, agnolotti is plural. And then we have all of our agnolotti. Beautiful. I'm getting very excited. I'm getting hungry. I am hungry. I'm not getting hungry. And I think we're ready to kind of bring this all together, right? Any questions about that pasta making process? What we're just doing, how to form these little guys, what to do with them once they're formed. Otherwise, we're going to cook everything and get this all into the one final version we have.
Yes, let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. Yes. Okay, let's give ourselves a little more room here. We'll bring this up. I wonder. Yeah, so let's do this so you can see. I wonder if this gets in the way a little bit. I just wonder if you can see in the pot a little better. This way. There we go. So we can see what's happening. Do a little adjustment. Cool. So we have our water. Just about boiling. Let's finish it. Bring it all the way up. Now is when I like to season my pasta water. If you've done this before with me, you know I don't like to make pasta water as salty as the sea. That's a really bad saying or phrase. Instead, make your pasta water just taste good. It should taste like a water soup or a water stock. It should be delicious. It should be something you want to dive into and cook in. Pasta water. That's what we're going for. So we'll take our salt. A good kind of starting point, they say is about a tablespoon of salt for each quart of water. That'll give you about like 1% salinity, but taste it depending on your brand of salt. Everything's a little different. And then let's set ourselves up for once our pasta's cooked. Because these little guys, they're tiny, the dough is thin, they're gonna cook fast. We're talking like 3-4 minutes. They're really all they need. Then the last like minute or so of cooking is going to happen in this other pan. So the Italians have this phrase when they're talking about pasta is the noodle plus the sauce through a process called trascinare, or the marriage or dragging through the noodle of the sauce creates pasta. So pasta is not something you just put sauce on top of. You're not like, hey, pasta plus sauce. It's noodle plus a sauce or condiment makes pasta. So in this case, we have our agnolotti is our noodle. We have our sauce or condiment is going to be our butter and our chicken stock. And then that will give us pasta. Everybody follow me there?
Yes.
So down underneath, I got the rest of my components. I made a quick and easy chicken stock to use for this. I just roasted off the chicken bones, a little bit of mirepoix and veggies in there. So I have my chicken stock, that's going to be the base that I'm using here. And you probably, depending on the size or the amount of pasta you're making, maybe 2 ounces per person of stock. It's going to cook down, it's going to thicken, or you're going to use the butter to thicken that. Another thing we're going to want here as our garnish, this is kind of optional, but I think it's nice to kind of tie the whole dish together. I have a little bit of the reserved yogurt. So, you know what, while we get all that ready, let's get our pasta in the water. Pause, rewind, this is what we're doing. Pasta goes in first. Let's go here, grab all of our guys, right into our boiling water. I'm gonna go everyone. Why not? Let's do it. Everybody's in. Fantastic. Now we have our stock in our separate pan. This is what we're going to use to catch everybody as they come out of the pool. And then now is our other option, like I was saying. What's nice is to have like your different garnishes and things like that. So I have a little bit of my extra yogurt here that I was using. This is like a really thick Icelandic style yogurt. Think of it like Greek yogurt. It's got a nice tang to it, good acidity. And I like to thin it out a bit because at this point it's not very spoonable, right? So I'm just going to grab a little bit of my hot pasta water. And that's going to help turn it into a bit of a more of a sauce or cream-like consistency. So that way it's something I could drizzle on top of my finished dish. Give it a nice little swirl or a nice little garnish. If you notice your yogurt is already really thin, you don't need to do this. But I'm going to do 3 little teaspoons of my hot pasta water. And now I don't have ice cold yogurt that I'm putting on top of my dish. And I also have something that is a little more saucy, a little more spoonable. And see, now I have something that I can pour off the spoon that's going to act as a really nice garnish. And also too, it kind of like helps stretch the yogurt. It's not as acidic, it's not as intense. It is almost like, you know, a sauce. It's almost like you just made a really interesting sauce. Then I'm going to grab one of my favorite ingredients. These are Calabrian chili peppers in paste form. So these are peppers you normally get. They're already all chopped up. They're processed. So I'm going to grab a small little spoonful in some of that oil that's in there. And I like spice, so this is one of my favorite parts here. But a nice little trick is if you have like a nice white creamy sauce and you put a little spoonful, but you don't stir it too much. I'm going to give it like 2 swirls. You get this really beautiful ripple-like effect that just kind of like adds that extra little touch, you know, like you're thinking about the person that's eating. You want them to eat with their eyes first. And so that's a really cool way to kind of like add that in without doing too much work. So now you have this kind of like dueling, swirling, magical, epic little sauce action happening. We have our toasted hazelnuts. I'm going to throw my hazelnuts into my saucepan here so that way they kind of cook. They make everything a little nutty. And then same thing too with my plumped raisins. So I'm using golden raisins. Raisins at the end of the day are just dried grapes, right? So you either have like white grapes or red grapes. Pretty much what you buy when you're buying grapes. And so, or green grapes rather, or white. These are dried. I like to plump these up a bit, either in a little bit of the hot pasta water, or if I was like in a restaurant, I like verjus, which is like a grape juice in a sense. They're using grape juice to rehydrate the grapes. And that's just so you're not eating, chewy grapes. But it makes them come back to life. And they're almost like then little gushers, little nature's candies, if you will. So those have been rehydrated and drained off from the liquid. I have my stock and everybody here in the pan. My pasta is floating now. It's been about 3 minutes. I'm going to grab everybody. We're going to come right to our pan here. I probably didn't need to cook everyone, but I'm hungry. I want them all. So we're going here. And because I have the one burner, I'm going to do a little switcheroo action where we're done with our water. We're going to come now. We have our stock. We have our noodles. Everybody here in the pan together, hanging out, right? Oh, I just covered myself. Sorry everyone. Don't want to do that. All right, so everybody's here in the pan. I want to make sure you can see though. There we go. That's better, right? You can see what's happening. Cool. So now we're going to bring this back to a simmer, and we're going to create a little bit of a pan sauce. Maybe you've seen me do this before, maybe you haven't, but it's kind of one of those like tricks or techniques that everybody on a pasta station or in the restaurant knows how to do. And it's that really coming together of the noodle, the stock, the glaze. And so a good starting point is about a tablespoon of butter or so per person. You could easily double that and go about 2 tablespoons per person or per portion you have in the pan. It really just depends how buttery or how rich you want this glaze to be. I'm going here. This is about 2 nice big tablespoons. I got about 2 portions of pasta here in the pan. I got about 2 ounces of my chicken stock. So we're going to add the butter now, and we're going to just swirl over high heat, bringing this all together. So what's happening now? The butter is emulsifying into the stock. It's melting, but then staying in an emulsification. Think of it almost like if you made salad dressing, you slowly add your fat while you're whisking, or if you're making hollandaise, you slowly add your fat while blending or whisking. We're adding our fat, and we're swirling or whisking to bring this all together. And now if you just left this on its own, eventually it'll get so hot, the butter will kind of get unstable, it'll break, it'll get separated, it'll look like a big greasy kind of oil spill, which is not what you want. So you want to keep an eye on this. You want to swirl and watch as the glaze tightens. The noodles are going to suck up all of that sauce, all that goodness, all of that glaze. We're twirling the pan around and swirling the pan around to make sure that nothing is sticking down to the bottom. And then just so we're getting nice even coverage and coating of all of our beautiful agnolotti. Oh, it smells so good. It smells good, looks good. Now we got to just give ourselves a little taste test on this glaze here, make sure it tastes good. Oh, it's lovely. I need a tiny bit of salt, just a little pinch. A little bit of salt there goes a long way. A couple of drops. And we're swirling, whirling. And what I like to look for to know when my glaze is tight enough, because some people kind of struggle. They make it either too tight and then it risks breaking. What I mean by breaking is like the butter loses its emulsification, things get greasy, you don't really have any sauce left. You just kind of have this like greasy mess. But in this case, you also don't want to leave it so loose where your noodles are just kind of like floating around inside of sauce. So what I like to do is drag my spoon through the center of my pot or my pan. And if I'm not able to create a nice line, I could go a little bit further. As soon as I'm able to separate and create a division between the two of the pan and the bottom of the pan and all my friends here that I have going on, give it a little toss, make sure everybody's nice and evenly coated. Now you come back here, you can see I'm able to create a line right down the center. The sauce doesn't pool back. I know that it's coating all of the noodles. Everybody's gripping each other and holding on. All really good things. We can get rid of our mise en place tray now. Fantastic. I'm going to go onto a plate. we're done here with our one last little tossy toss. We've already tasted. Seasoning is great, exactly where we want it. Now let's talk about plating, right? Everybody always asks, how do we plate? What are the things we're thinking about as if you're plating or building your plate? Pasta generally can always usually go in a bowl. Occasionally you do want to put it on a plate when you want everybody to kind of see what's happening, when you want to see all the action, when you know you're going to be eating it right away. One of the nice things about plating in a bowl is that things stay warm and hot until you're ready to eat them. Plate, that things cool down much more quickly. So something to keep in mind if you're trying to decide, should I put this on a plate, should I put this on a bowl? How quickly are you going to eat it? How fast can you take some photos before it's time to enjoy? Another thing to keep in mind as you're plating is to kind of just pick a portion of the plate and to start working off of that. So let's get you a little up close and personal plating action real quick, right? Let's get everyone in a better spot so they can all see. So we have our plate. We have our pasta. Everything is still nice and beautifully glazed. See what I mean? I could drag my spoon through the center. Nothing's pooling down at the bottom. All of that sauce is coated all of my noodles. And I'm just going to slowly start bringing everybody around into the plate. Leaving myself a little bit of room around the excess exterior. So that way there's room for everybody to kind of fan out.
It smells so good.
Oh, it's so lovely. I'm just going to give myself one nice little layer, filling in the gaps, making sure everybody's kind of sitting nicely, angled beautifully. Now we're going to come in again. We have this beautiful like chili yogurt sauce. Just the two stirred together, and I just gave it like 2 stirs, and you kind of get that really fantastic swirling effect. And it works really well, especially if you have like a fat and a liquid. So we had like the yogurt was the watery part, the clabbered chili oil was the wet part. I'm gonna go 1 little spoonful of this, and we're just gonna drizzle that all the way around. And you know what? I forgot my flowers. Should we grab some flowers to make it look pretty? So you know what? At the end of the day, let me grab flowers. I want to talk about flowers, because there's a lot of misconception about flowers.
I hope everyone else has flowers too. A little green for garnish if you don't have flowers. Nice little herbs on there.
Alright, I kept my flowers in the fridge because they die at room temperature, but we talk about edible flowers, because a lot of people think edible flowers just kind of go on things to look pretty. Oh, flowers make it fine dining and da 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 da, which is like, to an extent. But a lot of these edible flowers have flavor, they have texture. There's a lot more to them than just looking beautiful. A great example are these calendulas. So these grow. You could grow them, you could get them. As long as they're organic, they're not sprayed with anything, they're all edible. And they have a wonderful, really kind of like citrusy, almost like tea-like flavor that really balances out. It's almost like adding a squeeze of like lemon or lime, but like not either, onto the plate. And so even if you have the greens or just the blossoms, is a really great way to add some beauty to your plate, make it look extra fancy. But also then like you're adding a fresh herbal component that without adding herbs, you're eating it using an edible flower. So there's some misconception out there about edible flowers when it comes to like fine dining and just putting flowers on things, which, if you're buying a carton of confetti mix, yeah, you're just throwing flowers on stuff. But there's some thoughtfulness to put flowers on food, and sometimes it just makes sense, and it works.
So we do have one question.
Yes, question.
AJ wants to know if someone wanted to try using something soft like ricotta as the main filling, any advice for stabilizing it?
So if you're going to use ricotta as a filling, I want to take a bite of this so bad, but I'm going to answer your question, AJ. If you wanted to use ricotta as a filling, a couple things you could do to help kind of yourself out there. You hang the ricotta, press the ricotta like overnight, either in cheesecloth or in a strainer before, removing as much excess whey or water as possible. That'll definitely help. Another thing you can do to help through that process is you can add an egg or two to your ricotta. The egg is going to help seize up the ricotta during cooking, so that way it's not as loose and soft and mushy in that sense once it gets cooked, and that way it'll hold its place so well. You could also kind of like bind the ricotta with things. So like there's agnolotti that with braised greens, where you like can braise a bunch of kale or dandelion greens or collard greens. Wring out all the extra liquid or cook them down to where they're nice and dry. Chop them up super fine or throw them in the food processor, and then add your ricotta. So that way the ricotta's there, but it's stabilized with like another vegetable or something like hearty, like spinach or greens or kale. And so that way you still get that cheesiness with a little more stability from all of that. Good question. All right, close-up view. Here we go. Our beautiful plate of agnolotti del Plin with our saffron, garlic chicken, and spicy Calabrian chili yogurt.
Oh man, I'm so excited.
Man, I am so excited. This anticipation is killing me. Let me tell you, the flavor packed into each one of those little individual pieces of pasta. You taste the pepper, you taste the onion, you taste the garlic, you taste the saffron, all like coming in waves. You get a little bit of that spice from that chili oil on the top. Nice crunch from the nut. The hazelnut adds a wonderful flavor. Little pop from these little raisins. Oh man. What an interesting and playful take on the classic agnolotti. This is a fun one. It's a keeper. I would serve this on any one of my tasting menus. I'm so excited about this dish. I'm so glad everybody got to make this, got to try this recipe. And now John wants to know what to do with the leftover filling. I just saw that. Good question, John. A couple of things you could do with leftover filling. One, you can freeze it and just save it for the next time you're having a dinner party or you need to make agnolotti. Meat filling or agnolotti filling works out great. Another thing you could do, which I was actually already thinking about to do with mine, is I'm going to maybe dump some of this out into a bowl and add a couple of eggs to it, maybe a little breadcrumbs. And then you can either form it into balls or skewers. Go back on the grill and kebab it just to kind of like cook it, set it, finish cooking it, get a nice little char, caramelization on the outside, and the egg and breadcrumb will help hold it together. Or you could use it as like a stuffing for other things like cabbage. Like if you have like blanched cabbage leaves or kale leaves and you want to like stuff that, or you maybe mix it with some rice and stuff some peppers or stuff some acorn squash. Bake it in the oven.
Ooh,
Acts as
all
like a
sounds
really
really
nice
good.
like squash filling, acorn squash, a little bit of rice in there, stuffed red peppers, but with this.
Could you make like a mini meat pie too?
You can make a mini meat pie with that, would work really well.
Right.
That'd be great if you had like a pie crust and you wanted to put it in the pie crust and I would make like a little side gravy with the stock and then like a little parsley and chive action.
Boom.
Baby, now we're talking, huh? Oh man. That was delicious. I mean, I can't wait to eat the rest of this.
You
Oh,
can't see your face, Chef Joe. Let's see your whole face.
I just swapped the camera.
Great, perfect.
I saw that.
Thank you, everyone.
So good. Thank you everyone for joining today. I really appreciate all of you. A couple of things before we get out of here. Again, don't forget to take photos, post it, tag me on Instagram. Do me a favor down here, if you haven't already, in this little bottom corner, click the subscribe button for YouTube. I appreciate it. It's a good favor for me. It's not going to do anything bad for you. You're not going to get an email or anything wild like that. It's just like hitting follow on social media, but for YouTube. Other than that, if you have any questions for the future, find me on Instagram, and our little secret lingo or code word we use is the taco emoji. So anyone who's taken my classes, you know you slip the taco emoji into the first line of your direct message, and that way I know that you're part of the Pasta People Club. You're here with me, and so I always want to make sure to spend the extra time to answer your questions, whatever that may be.
One more question.
Yes.
AJ wants to know, do we freeze before boiling the leftover filling?
Leftover agnolotti.
Or leftover agnolotti?
Storing extra agnolotti, freeze before boiling. Yes, I would, as long as they're sealed well, you can freeze the leftover pasta just like any pasta. I don't love freezing pasta, but it totally works. My favorite way to store it, you can get a couple of days out of it, is like on semolina inside pizza boxes. And then that pizza box in the fridge will help whisk away any excess moisture so they're not getting sticky, they're not getting wet. But if you want to hold on to them even longer, freeze them on a tray, then put them into a bag. The faster you freeze them, the better off you're going to be. What I mean by fast is like put them in a very cold part of your freezer, or if you have like a fast chilling freezer option, that's going to be best, because the longer it takes, the slower they freeze, the bigger ice crystals you're going to get, and the more chance you risk of them like popping open when you go to cook them. But otherwise, yes, very good question. All good things. If you enjoyed this class, I hope to see you again soon. We have some more classes here on Chef Seed coming up later in the year. In a couple of weeks, we're doing a class not with Chef Seed, but with Truffle Shuffle from Shark Tank. And they're giving an optional ingredient kit delivery. We're doing pumpkin spice, ricotta, and gnocchi. Everything delivered to your door if you want, or you could just sign up and get your own ingredients. The link for that is on my website, so sign up for the newsletter and I'll send out the link there. Otherwise, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining. I couldn't do this without all of you, and you all mean the world to me. I appreciate it, and shout out to Bella. Thank you, Bella, as always.
Thank you.
For the chat room, nobody was crazy today, which is awesome. Very, very calm group of people. I love it. Pasta bringing us all together. And until next time, my friends, eat pasta and make love.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next